He has been suspended, sacked, sued, and dropped by the most powerful broadcaster in Britain. He once punched a colleague over a cold dinner and somehow kept his career anyway. And in 2008, at the very height of a global financial crash, he spent £6 million on a farm that earned him exactly £144 in its first year. By any sane measure, Jeremy Clarkson should have been finished a dozen times over. Instead, every disaster made him bigger. This is the story of how Britain's most reliable troublemaker turned scandal into an empire, and why the loudest man in the country spent a year hiding the quietest secret of all. He was born on the 11th of April, 1960, in Doncaster, a working town of pits and chip shops in South Yorkshire, the kind of place a man like Clarkson would spend much of his life trying to outrun. His parents, Edward and Shirley, ran a small and precarious business selling Paddington Bear toys, and the family lived with a quiet financial anxiety that never quite left him. He was sent on a partial scholarship to Repton, a private school in Derbyshire, where he found himself surrounded by boys with money he did not have, and an easy confidence he both resented and admired. He left without distinction, average by his own account, but already carrying the one instinct that would define everything that followed. He knew how to make people look. That instinct was sharpened in the least glamorous place imaginable. He cut his teeth in local journalism, filing copy for the Rotherham Advertiser, the unremarkable apprenticeship most television legends prefer to bury. Then in 1988, he joined a modest motoring program called Top Gear, and slowly, deliberately, he turned it into something nobody expected. He made people care about a car the way most writers reserve for a love affair. He wrote newspaper columns that readers argued about over breakfast. And he built his entire brand on a single, dangerous idea. He would say loudly what his audience only dared to think. The relaunched Top Gear was eventually watched by hundreds of millions of people around the world. But a formula built on provocation guarantees one thing above all others. Sooner or later, it explodes. It exploded in March of 2015. After a long day of filming in North Yorkshire, Clarkson discovered there was no hot meal waiting for him, and he punched his own producer, a man named Oisin Tiemann, in the face. The BBC, with characteristic delicacy, called it a fracas. Tiemann declined to make a formal complaint. None of it mattered. The broadcaster suspended him, and then it let his contract quietly expire. By any reasonable measure, this should have been the end. He had assaulted a colleague on the job. Instead, something extraordinary happened. More than 1 million people signed a petition demanding his return. Newspaper columnists wrote impassioned defences of the man who had thrown the punch. The country seemed to decide that losing Clarkson was a worse outcome than the thing he had actually done. And within months, he proved them right, signing a reported multi-million-pound deal with Amazon Prime Video for a new show called The Grand Tour, and taking with him the enormous audience the BBC had spent 30 years building. The institution lost. He won. But the strangest chapter of his life had nothing to do with cars at all. To understand it, you have to understand the woman behind much of his success. Clarkson married his second wife, Frances Kane, in 1993, and for more than 2 decades she was not only his partner, but the quiet architect of his commercial empire, the deal maker standing behind the loudest man in Britain. That marriage ended in 2014, after 21 years, yet she stayed involved in the business side of his operations, an arrangement far less dramatic than the press had hoped for. And it was around this same period of upheaval that his most unlikely gamble began to take shape. Back in 2008, at the height of the global financial crisis, he had quietly bought around 1,000 acres of Cotswold farmland for roughly £6 million. His friends thought he had lost his mind. For a while, the numbers suggested they were right. His first proper year of farming, the land earned him a profit of £144. Not 1,000, 144. And yet out of that comic failure, he built the most unlikely success of his career. Clarkson's farm turned the mud and the chaos into a global phenomenon. The diddly-squat farm shop drew traffic jams that stretched for miles down quiet country lanes. His Hawkston beer reached supermarket shelves and thousands of pubs. And he opened a pub of his own, the Farmer's Dog, which became a destination in its own right. The man who insists he does not understand business had, almost by accident, built an empire. So where does the contradiction finally rest? In October of 2023, Clarkson was rushed to hospital with a blocked artery and a heart heading toward catastrophe, a scare he survived with his usual dark humour. And then, in the summer of 2025, came the diagnosis he chose to hide. Aggressive prostate cancer, caught early, treated with surgery, and then, as he told it, a course of treatment that had gone awry. He kept it from the public for over a year, revealing it only in the final somber episodes of his farm show in June 2026, telling his colleagues and his viewers that if the treatment worked, he would see them again, and if it did not, he would not. For once, the loudest man in Britain had nothing loud to say. It is the question that has followed him his whole life, and it has never been louder than now. Is Jeremy Clarkson a national treasure, or a professional troublemaker who got away with it? Maybe the strangest truth is that he has always been both. If you want the full story of how the farm became an empire, that one is worth watching next.